Welcome to Sinful's Horror Stories. If you are new to my channel, please be sure to subscribe now for future content. Please make sure to leave a thumbs up on this video and turn your video notifications on to make sure you don't miss out on any one of Sinful's uploads. Email all of your true scary stories to thesinfulsavant@gmail.com. I will drop a link to my email in the description box below as well. Sit back, relax, and enjoy these terrifying hitchhiking stories. The idea of hitchhiking across the world and relying on the kindness of strangers to get you from point A to point Z is a romantic idea. But for every cinematic story of people meeting at a truck stop and becoming fast friends, there are hundreds of real-life hitchhiking horror stories. The stories listed here should convince you that hitchhiking is simply not safe. Not only can you get hit by a car or have all of your money stolen, but you could end up being a sex slave who sleeps in a coffin under your captor's waterbed for close to a decade. Or you could end up dead. The open road is a beautiful place where you can make friends that you'd otherwise never meet and have adventures that will change your life. But there are also extreme dangers to traveling with strangers on highways and back roads. No matter how trustworthy or well-intentioned a driver might seem, it's nearly impossible to tell if they're actually a predator or a murderer preying upon innocent hitchhikers. Ben Rhodes is a trucker who allegedly admitted that he had been torturing women for 15 years as he crisscrossed America by highway. The sadistic trucker kept a briefcase full of alligator clips, leashes, handcuffs, whips, and dildos. He was caught when an Arizona state trooper decided to chat with Rhodes, who had parked his big rig dangerously close to the shoulder of Interstate 40. Inside Rhodes' cab, the trooper found a woman shackled to the door, covered in welts, cuts, and with a horse bridle secured to her mouth and neck. After Rhodes was arrested, he was tied to a series of hitchhiker murders in multiple states and received multiple life sentences in Illinois and Texas. From the late 80s to the early 2000s, the bodies of as many as 12 hitchhikers, including 18-year-old Katherine Graham and 32-year-old Tony Jones, turned up on a desolate stretch of highway outside the cattle town of Hughenden. This stretch of highway has been dubbed the Highway of Death as a result. The murders remain unsolved. Thus far, it's impossible to know if all of the murders are the work of a single killer or if this part of the Australian outback is an area where bodies of victims can be easily and secretly discarded. On May 19, 1977, 20-year-old Colleen Stan decided to hitchhike 400 miles from Eugene, Oregon to surprise her friend in Westwood, California for her birthday. She was less than 100 miles away from her destination when she had the misfortune of running into Cameron Hooker, a 23-year-old lumber mill worker. Hooker was traveling with his wife and baby when he picked up Stan and forced her to be a sex slave in their home for 7 years. During that time, Stan slept in a box under the couple's waterbed and was repeatedly raped and tortured. Stan wasn't freed until 1984, when Hooker's wife helped her escape and get to a bus stop. At his trial, Hooker was sentenced to 104 years in prison. Throughout the early 70s, the Sonoma Valley of California was thought to be an ideal spot for hitchhiking. In reality, it was the site of a brutal series of slayings that lasted from 1972 to 1979. Over the course of 7 years, 8 young women ranging from the ages of 13 to 20 were found raped and murdered in the rural outskirts of Santa Rosa, California. No one was ever convicted of the crimes, but one of the main suspects in the case is the elusive Zodiac killer. If you're traveling through Iceland, it's not out of the ordinary to hitchhike across a small glacial country. But on August 16, 1982, sisters Yvette and Marie Bashad were trekking across the beautiful country and accepted a ride that would change their world forever. The driver, Gritar Sigur Aranesson, dropped the two sisters off at a cabin before accusing them of hiding cannabis, bashing Marie in the head with a rock, and shooting Yvette with a shotgun. Marie survived by hiding in a sleeping bag and running after a police car that happened to drive by. Arneson was convicted of murder. In July of 2016, a hitchhiker near Brakpan, South Africa, accepted a ride from two unknown men and ended up on the worst ride of his life. After two more men, seemingly hitchhikers, got in the car, they grimly told him he had gotten into the wrong car. One of the men then punched the hitchhiker in the face before tying him up and shooting him 5 times in the leg. Since this happened while the car was in motion, the driver ended up accidentally running into the wall of a house in Kauai Thema. The suspects fled the scene and left the hitchhiker in the car. Despite injuries sustained, the man survived. A Polish man traveling through Ireland to buy a car flagged down a car for a ride that seemed to belong to a family. Once in the car, he didn't mind sitting between two children. One was a 6-month-old, the other was 8 years old. After about 15 minutes, he realized all was not as it seemed when they locked him in and met up with a second car on the side of the road. Even though the hitchhiker gave his attackers all his money, they stabbed him 5 or 6 times in the legs in front of the children. Paramedics arrived on the scene just in time to save the man's life. On September 7, 1982, 2 men from upstate New York picked up an 18-year-old hitchhiker named Randall Shoptwees, who was making his way to Alaska. The men had been drinking all day and made the decision to rob the hitchhiker just before pulling over to pick him up. When they picked up Shoptwees, he resisted their robbery attempt. However, they managed to handcuff him and slit his throat. The knife penetrated him so deeply that when Shoptwees' body was found, his head was almost completely severed. Both men were sentenced and remain in prison to this day. In the 90s, trucker Keith Hunter Jesperson was the wrong guy to hitch a ride with. He was a serial killer who at the time claimed to have murdered 160 victims, although he later recanted his confession and admitted that he had only killed 8 women. His method was to pick up victims at a gas station or on the side of the road, strangle them, and dump their bodies in another state. One woman who he let use his credit card to make a long-distance call woke him up in the middle of the night, making him angry enough to kill her. In order to destroy all the evidence of his crime, he then strapped her to the bottom of his truck and dragged her along the highway until she was unrecognizable. While hitchhiking across New Zealand in 1989, Urban Hoagland and Heidi Pekkanen disappeared outside of Thames, a city on the southwestern end of the country's North Island. Despite a massive search for the couple, nothing was discovered until Hoagland's body was found in 1991. Pekkanen's body was never found. Native New Zealander David Tamhir was convicted of their murders and sentenced to 20 years in prison. controversy continues to surround the legitimacy of the conviction. Tamahir continues to deny that he played any part in their murders. Thank you guys for watching and listening, and please make sure you leave your notifications on to alert you of new videos. Email your true scary stories to thesinfulsavant@gmail.com. I hope everyone had a Merry Christmas this year, and hopefully we'll have a Happy New Year. Until we meet again, stay sinful.